Hi everyone. So today I am going to discuss about what is the difference between test case and test scenario. So in my previous videos I have discussed about what do you mean by test case and what do you mean by test scenario. So if you guys have not seen my last two videos, so I am requesting you to please see my test case and test scenarios videos, then come to this video. Then you will get a clear understand that what is the difference between test case and test scenario. First we have to know that what do you mean by test case, okay, and what do you mean by test scenario. Then we can conclude that what is the difference between test case and test scenario. So as I have already told you that test scenario is a one line statement and one test scenario can hold multiple test case, right? So what do you mean by test case? So test case is a defined format for software testing required to check if a particular application is working or not. Okay, it's a defined format, and in that defined format way we have to check that if a particular application is working perfectly fine or not. Like, and the other thing is that what do you mean by test scenario? So test scenario is defined as any functionality that can be tested. Okay, let's just understand with an example. Suppose there is a login form. So in that login form there is a username field, there is a password field, and there is a login button. So for that particular login page, what is the test scenario? So test scenario should be login functionality is working perfectly fine or not. So that is the test scenario. Okay, so any functionality that can be tested, that is the test scenario. And what is the test case of that example? Test case means I have already told that one test scenario can hold multiple test case, right? So for that login functionality, the test case should be test case number one, enter valid username, enter valid password, click on login button. So that is the one test case. Then second test case, maybe enter invalid username, enter invalid password, and click on login button. Then test case 3, enter valid username, enter invalid password, and click on login button. Then fourth test case, enter invalid username, enter valid password, then click on login button, and so on. So lots of test case should be there based upon that login functionality. Okay, so now I hope you have clear understanding that what do you mean by test case and what do you mean by test scenario. Now let's jump to the our today's main topic, that is what is the difference between that two. Okay, so test case. So test case contain define state test step, data, expected results, actual results for testing all the features of an application. So in my test case video I have discussed all of these things, that what do you mean by test step, what do you mean by test data, what is expected results, etc, etc. So test case contain define test step, test data, expected results, actual results for testing all the features of an application. And on the other hand, a test scenario contains a high level documentation which describes an end-to-end functionality to be tested. High level documentation means login functionality is working or not. That means we are checking on the very high level, very upper level. So we are checking on that. So that is the test scenario. So test scenario contain a high level documentation which describes an end-to-end functionality to be tested. Okay. Then point number 2. So what do you mean by test case? So test case we can say like how to test. How to test is the test case. So test case guides a user on how to test. Okay. And on the other hand, test scenario means what to test. So test scenario means what to test. So how test case how to test means we are testing the login functionality is working or not. So we are checking on that. So how to test the login functionality, that is the test scenario. And on the other hand, so how to test means that is the test case. How to test. So I'm giving an example. So suppose for the login button. So what do you mean by test case? Test case means how to test. Means we have to enter invalid username, valid password, clicking on the login button. We have to enter valid username, valid password, clicking on the login button. We have to enter invalid username, invalid password, click on the login button. That means how we are testing. That is the test case. And on the other hand, test scenario means what to test. What to test means we are testing the login functionality. So in which component we are checking, in which things we are checking, that is the test scenario. So test case guides a user on how to test. On the other hand, test scenario guides the user on what to test. Okay, now come to the point number 3. What is the purpose of test case? So the purpose of test case is to validate the test scenario by executing a set of steps. So if you guys have seen my how to write test case in manual testing, this video, so you already seen that, right? So if you have not seen it, please see my how to write manual testing, how to write test cases in manual testing video. Okay, so you guys have clear understand that what is the purpose of test case. So purpose of test case is to validate the test scenario by executing the set of steps. On the other hand, test scenario, what is the purpose? So purpose of test scenario is to test end-to-end functionality of an application. End-to-end functionality of an application means login functionality is working perfectly or not, logout functionality is working perfectly or not, then forget password functionality is working perfectly fine or not. So that is the test scenario purpose. Okay, now coming to the fourth point. What is fourth point? What test case says? So the test case have defined of step, prerequisite, expected results, etc. So therefore there is no ambiguity in this process. So in the test case we have maintained lots of parameter, right? So if we are maintaining lots of parameter like test case ID, test case description, test scenario ID, test step, test scenario description, expected result, actual results, that means we can say that there is no ambiguity in the process. Okay, on the other hand, test scenario is a one-line statement. So there is always the possibility of ambiguity during the testing. How? So in the test scenario, we have just mentioned that check the login functionality of an application. Now, if I am telling that need to check the login functionality of an application, that means there is a possibility of ambiguity during the testing. Okay. Now, point number 5. So test case is mostly derived from test scenario because a test scenario can hold multiple test case. So multiple test case can be derived from a single test scenario. Okay. And on the other hand, test scenarios are derived from the BRS, SRS, etc. So based upon business requirement specification, based upon software requirement specification, based upon use case, we are going to write the test scenario. Okay. And based upon the test scenario, we are writing the test case. So that's why test case is derived from the test scenario and multiple test case can be derived from a single test scenario. Now, point number 6. Test case are a low level action, very deep level action. So we have to cover all the thing on the test case. So that's why test case are low level action. On the other hand, test scenarios are high level action. Okay, because we are just writing the test scenario, so need to verify the login functionality. That means a very high level. We are just mentioning that what to test, right? Now, point number 7. Test case are more time consuming process compared to test scenario. Because one test scenario can hold multiple test case. So suppose the test scenario is login functionality is working perfectly fine or not. So if I write this statement, it will take maximum 1 to 2 minutes. But as I have already told that one test scenario can hold multiple test case. So suppose under one test scenario, there are 10 test cases. So if one test scenario is taking 2 minutes, then to 10 test cases, it will take 10 into 2, means 20 minutes. That means it's a more time consuming process. So test cases are more time consuming process compared to test scenarios. On the other hand, test scenarios are less time consuming process compared to test case. Now, point number 8. For the test case, required more resources to create and execute test case. Okay, and on the other hand, for the test scenario, relatively less resources enough to create and test during the test scenarios. Okay, so for the test case, it will take more resource to create and execute the test cases. On the other hand, test scenarios, it will take less resource to create and executing the test scenarios. Okay, now point number 9. Test case are written by the tester only. Test case are written by the tester only. On the other hand, test scenarios are written by the test lead, business analyst, and the tester. Okay. So what is the example of test case? So test case means enter valid username, valid password, clicking on the login button. Enter invalid username, enter invalid password, clicking on the login button. Enter valid username, enter invalid password, clicking on the login button. Enter invalid username, enter valid password, clicking on the login button. So there are lots of test cases are there. So these are the example, okay, for any login functionality. Now example of test scenario means need to check the login functionality of an application is working perfectly fine or not. Only this one line statement. Okay, now clear. Now point number 11. So what test case? So test case says that it will be harder to create and maintain. It will be harder to create and maintain because lots of parameters are there, lots of things we have to write, like test case scenario ID, test case description, test scenario description, expected results, actual result, test data, prerequisite or precondition, then status, then comments. So lots of things we have to write for the test case template. So that's why it will be harder to create and maintain. And on the other hand, test scenario is very easy to create and maintain because it's a one line statement. We have to write only the take the login functionality of an application. That's it. Okay. So these are the important difference between the test case and test scenario. And guys, one thing, it is also very important questions for interview. If you are a fresher, if you are experienced, doesn't matter, but most of the time interviewer will ask you that what is the difference between test case and test scenarios, and lots of confusions are there in your mind. So everybody has lots of confusion between the test case and test scenarios. Now today I think I have cleared all of your confusions, all of your doubt. Okay, so you have to remember these 11 differences between the test case and test scenarios. So if you guys have any doubt, so please comment me. If you guys like my video, one thumbs up. Share this video to your nearest friends so that they can easily understand that what is the difference between these two. And subscribe to my channel EduPaat and stay with me. So see you in the next videos with another topic of software testing. Thank you.